West Memphis, Arkansas. Spring, 1993. A small southern town where nothing ever stayed hidden for long, except fear. Churches stood on every corner. Neighbors knew each other's cars. Children rode bikes until the sun slipped behind the trees lining the bayou. And yet, beneath the quiet routine, something darker was already waiting. On the afternoon of May 5th, 3 8-year-old boys disappeared. Michael Moore, Christopher Byers, Stevie Branch. They were last seen riding their bikes near a wooded drainage area locals called Robin Hood Hills, a place parents warned their kids about, but never truly feared, until that night. As the sun went down, panic rose. Mothers called out names from porches. Fathers searched ditches with flashlights. Police cruisers rolled slowly through neighborhoods, their lights cutting through the dusk like nervous eyes. By midnight, the town was wide awake. By morning, it would never sleep the same way again. The bodies were found submerged in muddy water, naked, bound, bruised. One of the boys had been mutilated so badly that investigators struggled to describe it without looking away. The scene was chaotic, horrifying, and immediately people wanted an answer that made sense, something they could point to and say, "That's why this happened." West Memphis didn't look for evidence first. It looked for meaning. Rumors spread faster than facts. Words like ritual, cult, satanic whispered from kitchen tables to police radios. The early 1990s were still deep in the grip of moral panic, a time when black clothes, heavy metal music, and quiet anger were enough to turn suspicion into certainty. And somewhere in that fear, 3 teenage boys quietly stepped into the crosshairs. Damien Eccles, a troubled outsider, long hair, black clothes, books about the occult, a reputation that made people uncomfortable, which, in West Memphis, was often enough to be dangerous. Alongside him, Jason Baldwin, Jesse Miskelly Jr. Teenagers, not killers, but soon the town would decide otherwise. As police stood knee-deep in muddy water staring at the aftermath of unimaginable violence, one truth became clear. This case would not be guided by patience. It would be driven by fear. And once fear takes control, justice rarely survives. The pressure came fast. West Memphis police had 3 dead children, no clear suspect, and a town demanding answers. Every hour without an arrest felt like failure. Every rumor became a lead. Every uncomfortable kid became a possibility. They didn't wait for evidence. They went looking for a story that fit. Their focus settled on Jesse Miskelly Jr., 17 years old, low IQ, eager to please, easy to intimidate. He was brought in for questioning on June 3, 1993. He would leave hours later, having confessed to a crime many believe he didn't understand, let alone commit. The interrogation lasted nearly 12 hours. Most of it was unrecorded. What was recorded revealed something disturbing. Detectives fed Jesse details, corrected his answers, redirected his confusion until the story matched the crime scene, even when timelines didn't align. Jesse got basic facts wrong. The time of death, the order of events, the location of injuries. But instead of questioning the confession, police reshaped it. Once they had Jesse's words, they had leverage. Damien Eccles was arrested next. The perfect suspect, at least on paper. He talked about death openly. He wore black. He challenged authority. He didn't try to make people comfortable. In a town gripped by fear of the occult, that was enough. Jason Baldwin followed. 3 teenagers, 1 narrative. Evidence remained thin. No DNA linking them to the scene. No eyewitnesses. No murder weapons. But prosecutors had something they believed mattered more. A confession. A motive rooted in fear. And a community ready to believe the worst. As news spread, West Memphis exhaled. Not because justice was served, but because uncertainty had an enemy now. The town could stop asking who and start believing why. But beneath the surface, cracks were already forming. Because confessions built on pressure don't hold truth. They hold desperation. And desperation was about to be tested in a courtroom where fear would speak louder than facts. The trial began in early 1994, and from the first day it was clear this courtroom was not searching for truth, it was searching for confirmation. The prosecution's case leaned heavily on belief, not proof. They spoke of ritual sacrifice, of occult symbols, of evil influence lurking in the woods of Robin Hood Hills. Experts were called who spoke confidently about satanic practices, even though their credentials were thin, their methods outdated, and their conclusions rooted more in fear than science. There was no physical evidence tying any of the 3 boys to the murders. No DNA, no blood, no fibers. But the jury was shown drawings of pentagrams, heard lyrics from heavy metal songs, listened as Damien Eccles' interests and personality were framed as evidence of murder. Who he was became more important than what he had done. Jesse Miscali was tried first. His confession, the same one riddled with errors, was presented as fact. The jury never heard the full interrogation, never saw how answers were shaped, nudged, corrected. They deliberated for hours. The verdict? Guilty. Life plus 40 years. Jesse barely reacted. He looked confused, lost, like a boy still trying to understand how words spoken in a small room had turned into a life sentence. Damien Eccles and Jason Baldwin were tried together. Damien sat quietly, aware that he was no longer a person in that courtroom. He was a symbol, something the town needed him to be. Jason Baldwin watched the jury closely, his face tight with disbelief. When the verdict came, it split their fates. Jason Baldwin, life in prison. Damien Eccles, death row. No murder weapon, no forensic link, no eyewitness, just fear, sealed with a sentence. Outside the courthouse, some people cried. Others felt relief. The nightmare had a shape now, a name, 3 faces behind bars. But for those who looked closer, one question refused to go away. If this was justice, why did it feel so wrong? As the prison doors closed behind the West Memphis Three, something else began quietly opening. Doubt. Journalists started asking uncomfortable questions. Lawyers began rereading transcripts. And far beyond Arkansas, people who had never heard of West Memphis felt something shift. Because this case wasn't just about 3 murdered children anymore. It was about whether fear had condemned 3 more. For years, the case sat in silence. 3 teenagers grew into men behind prison walls. The town moved on, or tried to. And the murders of 3 8-year-old boys remained frozen in time, officially solved. But the doubts never disappeared. They waited. In the late 1990s, journalists and independent investigators began to reopen the files. What they found was disturbing. Witness statements that shifted over time, evidence that had never been properly tested, expert testimony that collapsed under modern scrutiny. And then, DNA. By the early 2000s, advances in forensic science allowed evidence from the crime scene to be re-examined. The results changed everything. None of the DNA recovered matched Damien Echols, Jason Baldwin, or Jesse Miskelly. Some of it didn't even belong to anyone known to be at the scene. One sample, taken from a shoelace used to bind a victim, was later linked to a man connected to one of the boy's stepfathers. It wasn't proof of guilt, but it was proof of doubt. Public interest exploded. Documentaries brought cameras into the case. Musicians, actors, and activists began speaking out. Legal defense funds grew. The world was watching a small Arkansas courtroom again, this time with sharper eyes. The narrative shifted from evil teenagers to possibly innocent men. Inside prison, Damien Echols waited on death row. Years blurred together. Execution dates loomed, then vanished. Appeals crawled forward, slowed by procedure and resistance. Jason Baldwin quietly maintained his innocence year after year. Jesse Miskelly, whose confession had started it all, recanted repeatedly. But the system moved carefully now, because admitting a mistake this big would mean admitting something far worse, that fear put 3 boys in prison for life. As evidence mounted, prosecutors faced a choice: retry the case and risk losing everything, or find another way out. The answer came in 2011, a legal compromise, one that would free the men without declaring them innocent. In August 2011, after 18 years behind bars, the West Memphis Three walked out of prison. But freedom came with a condition. They entered Alford pleas, a rare legal agreement allowing defendants to maintain their innocence while acknowledging that prosecutors could convince a jury of their guilt. It was justice without truth. Damien Echols left death row as a free man. Jason Baldwin stepped into sunlight he hadn't seen since his teens. Jesse Miskelly walked out carrying the weight of a confession that had never stopped haunting him. They were free, but not exonerated. Their records remained stained, and the murders of Michael Moore, Christopher Byers, and Stevie Branch remained officially unsolved. The deal divided the nation. Some saw it as a quiet admission of error by the state. Others believed it allowed killers to escape accountability. But one fact stood firm. No court ever explained the DNA. No retrial tested the evidence. No alternative suspect was fully examined. The system chose closure over answers. For the families, there was no relief. 3 children were still dead. No one stood convicted in a way that satisfied grief, and the town of West Memphis remained trapped between 2 unbearable possibilities: that 3 innocent teenagers were imprisoned for nearly 2 decades, or that the real killer or killers were never caught at all. Today, the case stands as one of the most controversial in American history, a warning about moral panic, about rushed justice, about what happens when fear replaces evidence. The story of the West Memphis Three is not just about a crime, it's about a system tested and found wanting. Some cases end with answers. This one ends with a question that still echoes through Arkansas woods. What happens when the wrong story is believed and the truth is left behind?